Hi there, U.S. history students. Welcome. Here I am in an empty classroom talking to my computer once again. I don't feel like a crazy person yet, but we're slowly making our way there. This lesson today, 4.4, it says the Civil War in 1862. What does that mean? Well, we're going to be talking about the first big year of truly heavy-duty fighting and what that was shaking out like between the two sides. And then we're going to look at this really key visionary turning point, or the turning point of the vision of the war from a Union perspective with Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, a key moment in the war. So we'll explore that. And the lens I want to put on here is this lens of being seekers of justice, which of course is something that we grow in when we walk with Jesus. God is keenly interested in matters of justice in this world, and it's always going to be imperfect on this side of heaven, and we understand that. We understand how restoration will sort of lead back into fallenness again. That's okay. That's not new news for us, but I want us to just sort of have a keen eye today on Abraham Lincoln's approach to justice. And again, it's pragmatic as always with him, but there is so much there to appreciate and honor, or to just even try to internalize and seek to grow, I think. Abraham Lincoln is not God. He's not Jesus. He's not a prophet. Even the question, is he a Christian, is an interesting question. But there is much to learn about his approach to civic justice in this lesson today. So I just want to kind of put that lens on and say, have your eyes open for that as we proceed. Okay, so let's jump in. I think it's safe to say, gang, that in the first 2 years of the war, if not 2.5 or 3 years of the war, the Confederate States of America has the upper hand on the battlefield. Again, the Union has so much more stuff, so much more men, material, food, supplies, all that kind of stuff. They just had lousy military leadership, by and large, especially in the Eastern theater of war, which is sort of in the Virginia area, where the armies of Robert E. Lee are running roughshod. And so Lincoln has sort of pulled together through a draft and through calls for recruitment this massive army, all right, of over 600,000. This enormous army, a modern army in terms of its organization and structure, in terms of its artillery, and all this kind of stuff. And in command, he was placed hotshot young General George McClellan, pictured here with his hand in his shirt like Napoleon, with an exquisite mustache, handsome guy, young, confident, ready for the job. Just ask him if you're not sure. All right, George McClellan. Now, George McClellan does very good work taking this army of very, very green, from mostly farmers and immigrants and everyone else, and whipping them into an organized army. That is like, you give that to McClellan, you give him credit for that. You even give him credit for a plan that should work. He and Lincoln sit down and say, look, okay, 1862, we are going to invade Virginia, all right? And we are going to take the Confederate capital at Richmond. And along the way, we will engage with Robert E. Lee's army, and we will defeat and destroy that army because you have far more soldiers and everything else you need. And McClellan's like, absolutely, Mr. President, just wait and see. It's going to be beautiful. And then we hit the battlefield, and it is a totally different story. When shots start getting fired, some men grow in stature, some men sharpen in thinking and resolve, and we'll learn about some of those men today in Robert E. Lee or Ulysses S. Grant. George McClellan does the opposite. He stalls, he freezes, he kind of gives excuses, he shrinks, he gets stuck. And Lee, who's a psychological master at just trying to figure out, who am I fighting against here, right? Who is this general and what's his move going to be? Lee just figures out McClellan is, I don't want to say afraid, but I'll say we can freeze him. It's just like he will, if you just sort of do the slightest thing, he'll just kind of freeze in place and say, okay, it's almost like everything has to be perfect for George McClellan to really move. And so it's this process of invading Virginia, moving toward Richmond, engaging Lee's army. Lee is aggressive. That's just Lee's tactic. He realizes the more aggressive I am and the more I just sort of keep punching at him, the more I get in McClellan's head, and McClellan is sort of panicking. And McClellan is sending back more telegrams to Lincoln saying, I need more soldiers, we're outnumbered. And he was never outnumbered. Not once was George McClellan outnumbered. In fact, he far outnumbered Lee's army. But Lee just sort of made him feel like he was outnumbered by just sort of overwhelming him. And McClellan wasn't moving. And when they would engage, Lee is the aggressor, and Lee was winning. And then McClellan would spend just sort of weeks doing nothing. And Lincoln's like, dude, we cannot wait our way into victory. Lincoln sends him these telegrams. One of my favorites just is like a short one to McClellan saying, hey, man, if you're not going to use the army, I'd like to borrow it for a while. You know, like, what are we doing here? And McClellan just sort of, it's like he just stalls because things aren't going according to plan, which of course they aren't going according to plan. And meanwhile, Lee's reputation as this sort of like invincible warrior who's running circles around his enemy, for his own men, they feel like, you know, Marse Robert, as they call him, sort of like Robert E. Lee is invincible. And for the Northern soldiers, they're also feeling like, I don't know, I get this bad feeling that he's invincible. I don't know how to beat him. Out west, and by out west here, I don't mean like the west of the Mississippi. I mean in the western theater of war, where the whole point is to control the Mississippi River. All right. Out west, we have the Union armies are sort of moving from the north into the border states, and again, sort of angling their way toward the Mississippi, if you can see here. And someone who's quickly making a name for himself, good and bad, is Ulysses S. Grant. And we'll really focus on him next time. But Grant earns victories at a place called Fort Donelson and Shiloh. And for Union newspapers, they'll take whatever. Northern newspapers are like, hey, any victory, great, fine. Because it's like, we're getting our butt kicked over in Virginia by Robert E. Lee. And our guy McClellan, this ain't panning out. So this guy Grant, okay, he's winning. We like that. Great, yay. But then it's like the casualty figures start coming in. And the numbers from the hospitals start coming in. And it's like in these battles, especially at the Battle of Shiloh, we're talking one day between the North and South, there's over 20,000 casualties in one day. And people are like, my God, what is happening? Like what is happening in these battles, and what sort of general is this guy Grant? Like, what is he doing to these soldiers? Is there any art to his battle at all, or is this just sort of like, is he like a butcher? Is he a meat grinder? And the fact of the matter is, guys, what was happening at places like Shiloh, this is just what war is like now. And we'll learn about that here. Like, this is just how war is going to be from now on. But the public just hadn't gotten their head around that yet. And this is not only what the Civil War is going to be like, this is what, World War I is going to be like this, and worse. This is just war now. This is modern war. This is industrial technology plus high numbers of, big Napoleon-sized armies. Put that together, and you have just crazy casualty rates, right? Where you're surpassing all the death toll. You're surpassing the death toll from the Revolutionary War now in just a matter of months. And the public is like, what is happening? And this adventure of a war that the public thought they were getting at the start, it ain't an adventure. Now it's like both sides are locked into this sort of like awful death match or this death struggle. And it's just starting to dawn on people what a nightmare this is going to be. And so it's really fair, guys, to ask, like, what made the war so deadly? It wasn't like Americans' fault that the war was deadly. It wasn't deadly for reasons of stupidity or anything like this. It's explained most easily through technology. All right. This is, when you look at the 19th century, big wars happening in the 19th century, there are not many examples of wars in which both sides were equipped with industrial technology. And so the South wasn't as nearly as industrialized as the North, as we've learned, but they still had access to industrial technology. The North certainly had it, and they were furnishing it and producing it. And what you're finding is when two nations equipped with industrial technology go to war against each other, it's a bloodbath. It is a sickening bloodbath. Specifically, let's talk the technology. Like now we have these mini balls that are called, and it's like it's a bullet-shaped bullet, all right. And now there's rifling technology. So now in the bore of a rifle, there's these sort of spiral grooves, right, which sort of send the bullets out spinning. And because they're spinning, they're now shooting accurately. in the Revolutionary War era, for example, they're firing these musket balls, which A, were homemade and handmade half the time, and so they were irregularly shaped, and B, there was none of this rifling involved, and so a musket ball is like a knuckleball in baseball, where it just sort of would kind of fly anywhere, right? Kind of close your eyes and shoot, and it's going to go in that general direction. But that was why, for so long, battle technology or battle tactics said you sort of put your soldiers in in tight ranked formation, right? Because you put them together. Because when you're firing, you're not being sharpshooters here. You're just sort of sending a wall of musket balls out there. And the strategy was, and it made perfect sense and it would work, like you hang together in tight formation, right? You will overwhelm your enemy that way. Now, that there is this rifling technology where you're actually shooting accurately, plus cannon, artillery that are more accurate and can fire longer distances, getting in these tight ranked formations is just suicide marches, right? And it took like half the war, more than half the war, for like everyone to finally kind of take the old war tactics playbook and throw it out and say, okay, we got to figure out new stuff here because this new technology is turning this crazy, right? We are dying at just fearsome rates. And of course, then it's worth remembering for most of the soldiers who died, the most common cause of death was disease. And that could be disease brought about by malnutrition or starvation, especially in the case of prisoners of war or Confederate soldiers where there was less food to go around. But the most common disease is just gangrene, just infected wounds. All right. So getting shot, even getting a clean shot, through the shoulder or something like that, well, you might recover from that, but then like gangrene or sepsis or some infection would set in, and that's it. That's game over. And of course, another reason why these infections would happen so frequently is because, you get shot in the arm, a broken bone like that, on a battlefield injury, setting it is just asking for infection. So they would sort of like cut off the arm at the elbow in these field hospitals with no anesthetic, and there's no germ theory either. So there's just like no one's sanitizing these tools. It's just like they're sawing off limbs in these field hospitals. It's craziness. Medicine had a long way to go. So like you'd say, medicine needing to catch up, new technology being there, old tactics, those things put together means this is an insanely deadly war. And it's like the whole world is getting a look at what industrial war is going to look like here in the future, and it ain't pretty. Pivoting, all right, to Abraham Lincoln. Safe to say that the first, let's say, year plus of the war has just not gone well. In his own personal life, it's been terrible. All right. Abraham Lincoln's son, his 11-year-old son, my son is 11 when I think about this. Abraham Lincoln's 11-year-old son has died. He caught pneumonia and died. And Lincoln's wife is just racked with grief and sort of going through a kind of a downward spiral herself. He's trying to hold her up. He's trying to deal with the grief of his own son, who was in certain ways he had spoiled. It was almost this was the son who everyone said was most like him, and he was just precocious and unusually curious and intelligent, and he's sort of grieving his son. This war has not gone well. His general is not winning. Even when they do win out west, it's at these numbers that are fearsome and awful, and he is in a deep despair. And he just recognizes, I cannot stare at myself and my own wounds. We have to figure out a way through this. And so what are ways that I can do these three? I'm trying to hit these different targets here. I have to preserve the Union of the United States. I'm elected president of the United States. What job do I have if not to preserve the United States? This Union war effort is not going well. I don't know how much longer we can keep going and keep losing before a lot of folks in the North just start saying, hey man, pull the plug. Hey, forget this. What are we doing, right? How much longer can we keep doing this? We have to, not only do we have to stop losing, we have to win. We have to go into the South. We have to defeat and subdue and crush them and crush that will to resist. How do we do this? And if I do all that and we left the slavery issue intact, are we just doomed to repeat this thing again? Even if we teach them that you can't secede, but we leave slavery intact, are we just asking for it again? And so Lincoln, in this despair, is just grappling. Right? What do I do? How do we proceed? And as the war is getting uglier and uglier, and we're into mid-1862, and it's been going on now 14, 16 months, and we're just waiting for some good news. I mean, the Union is like, we're supposed to win, right? We have all the stuff, right? Why aren't we winning? Well, we're losing. Forget winning. We're just losing, flat out losing now. Lincoln says, we need to change things up, right? What if we thought about this in just a different way here? Is there a way that we could move toward resolving the slavery question, that we could move toward liberating and freeing slaves, and do that in a way that helps us win the war, that might help turn the tables and give us the upper hand on the battlefield, where these two goals aren't working at odds? Like, well, if I free the slaves and I lose the border states, like, is there some way where I can just sort of frame this where they work in symbionts together? They work together on this. And so I wonder if we take this approach of saying we are now going to begin making this war about slavery and about liberating slaves, could it be that this whole group of abolitionists, all these people who are sort of sentimental toward the cause of abolition and ending slavery, who've been maybe somewhat muted in their support of the war, that I could sort of get a whole bunch of new shoulders behind the plow pushing with me if we said, you know what, yes, we're ending slavery, right? This war is going to be about the cause of ending slavery as well as preserving the Union. Can I bring them in with me? How about this? We have hundreds of thousands of free black people living in the North. Would they be willing to enlist and fight, right? Could I get their shoulders behind the plow with me? He's worried. You know, the Confederacy has been in communication with Great Britain. And Great Britain has increasingly been like, you know, it is an interesting idea for us to help you, you know. Just like France helped you guys in the Revolutionary War, we could do this. We could take the United States, break it in half. That would really weaken the economic position of the United States. The South, we do need your cotton, so if we help you, we can sort of set up a sweetheart deal where we keep getting your cotton at you know, beautiful rates that really help us. And so maybe, right, they're kind of flirting with this, maybe. And Lincoln is saying, okay, here's the deal. Sentiment in Great Britain, especially in Parliament, regarding slavery is overwhelmingly anti-slavery. Britain, give them credit, Britain has sort of led the world in going after slavery. Britain is the one that's pushing to abolish that Atlantic slave trade. Britain is literally enforcing that. They're like the police, sort of trying to stop these transactions of slaves going around. So Britain has sort of staked its flag on the stance of anti-slavery. Lincoln says, if I say this war is about ending slavery, that is probably going to be enough to convince Great Britain to stay on the sidelines. Because if you say, hey, Britain, the Union, the United States is fighting to end slavery. We dare you guys to join the pro-slavery side, the side that is openly, you know, fighting to preserve slavery. Because, you know, if as long as we're saying this is a war to preserve the United States, then Britain can say, well, what do we care about that, right? Let's break up the United States. But if we make this war about slavery, Britain is much more inclined to stay on the sidelines. That helps us win the war. Okay, Lincoln is also like, it is morally right to do this. Now, just because something is morally right, if it's not politically possible or prudent, that it might not always be the right move for the President of the United States. But Lincoln is saying, I'm seeing ways that would benefit us pragmatically, and it would be prudential, actually, to move toward making this about slavery. And beyond that, it is the morally right thing to do. And Lincoln presents to his cabinet, he's like, I'm thinking of making this war about slavery and just saying we are going to start liberating slaves. And his cabinet says, basically, we support you in this. Mr. President, this is a beautiful move. We want it. But right now we're losing the war. All right. And if we just sort of announce this right now as we're losing, it's just going to look like we're desperate, right? It's going to look kind of like a Hail Mary. Let's wait until we win a battle. And then we say, guys, just so that we know, this war is also about slavery. Let's do it from a position of strength rather than a position of weakness. So Lincoln is like, well, I mean, that means I got to wait for George McClellan to win a battle. And that sort of happens at the Battle of Antietam. Kind of. It should have happened at the Battle of Antietam. The Battle of Antietam took place in Maryland in mid-1862. Maryland is a border state. It's part of the Union. Lee has moved into the Union. In part, he's hoping to win a victory, just like, let me just move into, I mean, I'm feeling my oats right now. Let's move into a Union state. Let's pop them in the nose. Let's see if we can get Great Britain to feel like they should join up with us, right? And so Lee moves into a Union state. McClellan is going to engage him there and ends up at Antietam Creek in Maryland. A night before the battle, Union scouts come across an abandoned Confederate camp. Okay, so they do the thing that scouts do. They're looking around. They're rummaging through the stuff, to see if they can find, cash or food or something that they can put in their pockets, or is there any material that's around that might be interesting. They find a couple cigars wrapped up in some paper, and they go, ooh, hey, some cigars, and they're going to smoke the cigars, and they kind of unfold the paper they were wrapped up in, and looky here, it is General Lee's battle plans that says his exact position and what his first moves are going to be the next day. And they go, okay. And they quickly move this up the chain of command. They get it to McClellan. McClellan now knows what Lee has, where he is, what his moves will be. McClellan fires off a quick telegram to Lincoln saying, Mr. President, I think you'll like what you see tomorrow. This is going to be sweet. And it's like, here we go. And he can't capitalize on it. He fails to capitalize on it. He has every advantage. There's no other advantage that you could conceive of that McClellan could get, and he still can't decisively beat Lee. They basically fight to a draw amidst 23,000 dead and wounded in one day, the deadliest day in American history. And then Lee says, all right, well, forget it. He heads back to Virginia, because there's nothing like magical about Antietam Creek. It's not like we have to have Antietam Creek. He just wanted to score a victory up there. And as Lee is disengaging and leaving, McClellan doesn't pursue him. He doesn't chase him down. He doesn't sort of ride his tail and sort of keep going after his army. He just sort of lets them leave. And Lincoln's like, this is ridiculous. You aren't winning. You aren't doing anything. And then you won't even pursue him. And so Lincoln fires McClellan. In the wake of the battle, photographers, we now have photography in war for the first time in modern history. And photographers go to the battlefield and they're capturing the sights of these battles, and it brings home to Americans and people around the world what war looks like in a disturbing new way. And so this Battle of Antietam it's a Union victory technically because Lee was forced off of that position, but it's a frustrating victory. It's not a full victory. But for Lincoln, it's like, well, good enough. I've had this, Emancipation Proclamation sitting here in my desk drawer for months waiting for some good news. Day after Antietam, he issues it. Okay, announcement. Military decree from the commander-in-chief. This is not a law. This is like an act of war. As part of our war, we're announcing this new change. Here's the change. On the first day of January, in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then thenceforward and forever free. Now, you got to be a lawyer. You got to parse this language a little bit. What is that saying? All persons held as slaves within any state or part of a state where the people are in rebellion against the United States shall be then thenceforward and forever free. So what he's saying is on the 1st of January, 1863, all slaves in areas that are in rebellion against the United States are freed. I need you to ask yourself, how many slaves then were freed on January 1st, 1863. All slaves in parts of the United States that are in rebellion against the United States are free. How many slaves are free on January 1st? The answer, guys, is 0. 0 slaves are freed on the first day of the Emancipation Proclamation because the proclamation applies only to the areas in red, the areas controlled by the Confederacy. And it's not like Confederate plantation owners are going to be like, well, Abraham Lincoln said I had to free my slaves, and so, all right, slaves, be on your way and good luck to you. They're not going to do that. Lincoln is saying in the slaves that he could have freed in the border states are not freed. So what do we make of this, right? What is this? Is this some weird joke? No. There's thinking here, all right? The thinking, again, is I need to keep the border states with me. Border states, take this as, it's like when as a parent, I say to my kids downstairs, hey, video game time is done in 10 minutes. I kind of give them time to think and process this. I'm saying, I'm taking your video games away, but I'm giving you 10 minutes on it. To the border states, we're saying, slave time is done pretty quick here. All right, we're making this war about ending slavery, and we're not going to make you free them right now, but get it in your heads, it's going to be going away. It also is saying, after January 1st, every place we move into where we turn these red areas, Confederate areas, blue, we're going to be freeing those slaves. We are turning the army of the United States into a slave liberating army. Glory, hallelujah. And so Abraham Lincoln is saying, like this, what this is saying is we are going to be in the business now of freeing slaves. This war is about preserving the United States and ending slavery. Both. Those things together. And actually doing those things together helps us, because every time we move into the South and we liberate slaves, we are economically weakening them. And we're just saying we are pulling this thing out of your system, whether you like it or not. Like it says here in this cartoon, like the South has scrambled up the slavery tree, and that's been happening, all through the first half of the 19th century. And Lincoln's saying, now if you don't come down there, I'm going to cut the tree out from under you. And it's like, you know what? Fine, we're just cutting this tree out from under you. And I'm not going to do it right now. We're going to do it in stages, right? But make no mistake, this tree is coming down. This system is coming down. And abolitionists across the North, many of them loudly cheered. Here we go, right? Finally, we're just saying the truth that this war is about slavery, sort of like what the South had said. And we're going to fight to liberate slaves. Now, a lot of abolitionists complained because they said, why don't you free the slaves in the border states? Why don't you free the slaves in New Orleans that we've already captured, where we have the power to liberate them? He didn't go far enough. And Lincoln's like, I'm probably never going to please all these abolitionist folks. But look, we're moving this direction. A lot of Northerners of a democratic mindset said, you're losing us here, man. You're making this war about helping black folks, all right, freeing slaves. We don't want to fight for that. And people are saying, you got to revoke this. We're not going to keep our support for the war if you sort of turn it into this sort of cause like this. And Lincoln said beautifully, I may walk slowly, but I never walk backwards. All right, I'm not rescinding this. Abraham Lincoln, in his own life, he understood this document, this thing, this move toward emancipation is what I'm going to go down for. And he wanted to go down to history for. He was ambitious. He wanted to be a world historical figure. He understood this is going to be that. And then it just rallies hundreds of thousands of African Americans to support the Union cause, to enlist in the Union Army. It's hundreds of thousands of new shoulders behind the plow to push. In pursuit of justice, as we saw today, this long-awaited justice. I'm getting emotional because it's such a big part of our story. It's so beautiful. Would you have preferred that Lincoln had acted earlier and more boldly? Or do you prefer his pragmatic approach of looking for holes in the defense and moving the ball down the field that way? Lincoln is a skillful politician. Lincoln is a keen moral thinker. Which side of him are you most growing to appreciate as we tell this story? And just to consider, he's doing all this as he's going through intense personal grief. It's a remarkable story. Thank God for his leadership during that time. So that's it for our lesson today. I hope you guys have a great day. I'm looking forward to seeing some of your work on these scrapbook projects once they're eventually in. Take care, guys, and God bless.